on behalf of Institute of Regional Studies. It's wonderful that you are the eminent speaker today, and we are enlightened to hear you. I shall start with an introduction. Syed Iftikhar Gilani Sahab is a renowned journalist with nearly 3 decades of experience reporting from the Indian subcontinent and the Middle East. Politics, strategic, and foreign affairs are some of the areas he has consistently reported over the years. Syed Gilani Saab has headed bureaus of some of India's prominent publications and mentored teams of young journalists over the years. He is currently working at the International Reporting Division at the Turkish Global Wire and the Anadolu Agency, overseeing the Asia Pacific, America, Middle East, Africa, and Europe divisions. Till 2019, he was the editor, Strategic Affairs, and chief of the National Bureau at the Indian Daily, Daily News Analysis, which was published from Delhi, Mumbai, Pune, Bangalore, Indore, and Jaipur. He has written a book, My Days in Prison, and the Urdu translation of the book has won India's prestigious Literary Sahitya Akademi Award in 2008. He has led a research project on insurgencies in South Asia and have conferred the award for outstanding contribution in media by the government of Jammu and Kashmir in 2010. He is also the recipient of the prestigious Shah Waliullah Award by the Institute of Objective Studies for his contribution to journalism. He held the positions of Deputy Chairman of the Indian Parliament's Press Advisory Committee and Vice President of the Press Association of India. He has also served as an external discussant at the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, a premier security think tank in India, and a research advisor at the Center for Land-Based Studies, a strategic think tank. With this introduction, sir, I give floor to you. We will be discussing in detail what the delimitation process is all about and how does Prime Minister Modi and his government wants to achieve or what they want to achieve by implementing this process prior to holding assembly elections and what impacts it will have on the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you very much for giving this opportunity to be here with your scholars. It is actually a lot of these learned persons at your institute, and they know the issue of Jammu and Kashmir at very great length and all its other contours. But I confine myself here to one issue that is at hand, that's being debated and at the top of mind at present. So what has happened actually, this quite of late now, the government of India's attempts to redraw assembly constituencies, which is called a delimitation. There are many apprehensions, which I will discuss here. Let us go by slide. So can you just slide number two. So this is right now the map of the Jammu and Kashmir state, divided and subdivided. The map shows you how the state has changed since 1947. It has shrunk. What is now left, that is called the Jammu and Kashmir. It has just two divisions, this Kashmir Valley division and the Jammu division. Normally, every one of you know that the Kashmir Valley division is the Muslim majority division and the Jammu division is the Hindu majority division. So slide three. Okay, the slide three. This is the Kashmir division. It has 10 districts, and it should have been more, but we will discuss it later. It has 10 districts, and the slide 4 will show you the Jammu. It has also the 10 districts. Slide 4. Right, Jammu, it has also the 10 districts. We will now move to slide 5. It is the census of Jammu and Kashmir. Slide 5. Census of Jammu and Kashmir as per the 2011 census, the last census which has happened in India, because India the census happens after every 10 years. So 2021 was now the date, but because of the COVID it got delayed. So next year will be the fresh census. So this is the right now the latest census which we have. As per this census, it has the population. This is the total population, where the Muslims, they are 68.31%, Hindus 28.43%, Sikhs 1.87%, and Buddhists, because the census also included Ladakh, so they were 0.89%. Now the Ladakh is no more now the part of Jammu and Kashmir. So can we move now the slide 6? Okay. This slide 6. This is the Kashmir Valley population. Overall Kashmir Valley's population. You can see here the Kashmir Valley has a 96.4% Muslim population. So the total population of Kashmir Valley is, as you can, is here this 66 lakhs. Is this 6 million or 66 lakhs is the total population of the Kashmir Valley. So we can move the slide 7. Is the we have the Jammu division. In Jammu division's population is about Jammu division, the Hindus are 62.5%, Muslims are 33.45%, but the population of Jammu is 53 lakhs. It's almost 13 lakhs less than Kashmir Valley. So we can move to slide 8. Jammu itself has actually 3 regions. This is the first region, which is called the Jammu Tawi region, which is the bordering Punjab, and it is a Hindu majority. This is the only Hindu majority region in Jammu itself as well. Where in this Jammu Tawi region, the Muslims constitute 12.3%, the Hindus are 82.38%. But Jammu has 2 other regions, and both of the regions are the Muslim majority regions. Can you move the other slide? This is the Pir Panchal area, which is Rajouri and Poonch. This area, it has 74.52% Muslim population. And can you move the slide number? This is a Chenab. This is another Chenab Valley, which is again the Muslim majority area within this Jammu division as well. It has 59.97% of the Muslim population. So slide 11. This is now in Jammu division itself is not very homogeneous. It comprises Muslims are 33.45%, but here the lower caste Hindus, the Dalits, which were called, they are 20%. And this upper caste Brahmins, they are 23%. The Dogras, who actually ruled Kashmir for almost 100 years, they are just 12%. Then there are other two, these Vaishyas, these business communities, Khatris, Punjabi Khatris, which are actually called, they are 5.5%. And the Sikhs are 6% in this Jammu division, in this Jammu region. Can you get this is actually just for purpose of the academics. It's now not part of as per the part of Jammu and Kashmir, but the Ladakh division. Ladakh division has this. This is the population of the Ladakh division, where the Hindus, where the Muslims were 46.40%. Okay, can you get? Because mostly this is the detailed, I have given this detailed population chart of the Ladakh. Because of that, there is a very misconceptions, many in Pakistan as well, many writers in Pakistan, even up to the level of former foreign secretaries, who sometimes call Ladakh as the Buddhist majority district. It is not a Buddhist majority district quite at all. Not at all. Buddhists are this, if you can just go 39.65% as per the 2011 census, but the Muslims here also at 46.40%. So we just get slide number 14. Yes, based on this population distribution and Kashmir Valley's population, it has 1.5 million more than Jammu. This was the seat distributed. This was the seat distribution that the Jammu and this Kashmir had 46 seats in the assembly, and Jammu had 37 seats in the Jammu and Kashmir assembly. Total out of total 87 seats. So can you move now the slide 15 here? Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act, which was adopted by the Indian Parliament on August 2019, which provided a new legislature with 90 seats. So some seats, they have increased some seats. So slide 16. Yes. So on March 6, 2020, Government of India appointed a delimitation commission. If it is possible for you to read this delimitation commission, they have included in this delimitation that there will be a delimitation, or this drawing of borders will happen in Jammu and Kashmir, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Nagaland, and along with these states. So 17, but a year later, when they actually extended the term of this delimitation commission, so what happened? They excluded all these other states. The states of Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, and Nagaland were omitted, and only this delimitation was confined to Jammu and Kashmir. So it definitely gave rise to apprehensions why only this delimitation is happening only in Jammu and Kashmir, not in other states as they had actually promised. So slide 18. So you all remember this meeting which happened on this June 24th, when the leaders of this 9 mainstream political or pro-India political parties were met the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and this slide 19. So these leaders had demanded at that quite almost in quite very the consensus, quite it was almost a kind of a one voice that they had demanded return of statehood, restoration of assembly, semblance of its autonomy, putting on stop to demographic changes in the event of deprogation of local citizenship law, restoration and election to the regional assembly, setting up of a political structure. So slide 20, if you can. So, but what they were told, they were given a very specific roadmap by the Home Minister Amit Shah. What he mentioned is that they will be first undertaking an exercise of delimitation or redrawing of borders for assembly constituencies. Then there will be conduct of elections on new demarcations, allowing the new assembly to adopt a resolution to request New Delhi to return statehood. That is, the new assembly will pass a resolution and then request. Once exercise is completed, Indian Home Ministry will draft and then present legislation to the Parliament. And Jammu and Kashmir parties were asked to participate in this delimitation exercise. So the one thing, the achievement in this conference for the Indian government was, as a national conference, a major party in the region, it agreed to attend the delimitation commission's proceedings, because it was delimitation commission proceedings were stalled because the national conference has 3 members of parliament. They were not participating because they were the ex officio members of the delimitation commission. Because of their non-participation, this delimitation commission was not able to work. So we can go to other slide number 21. Yes. So in this delimitation commission, the BJP's ex officio member, BJP, Jatinder Singh, who was also member of this delimitation commission, he gave a presentation. He said that not the population, but the geography should be the area of the new assembly constituencies, because he wants to increase the seats for the Hindu majority Jammu division. We can go to other slide 22. So if you see the Jammu area of the Jammu and Kashmir right now, with the Jammu and Kashmir, which is in the Indian part of Jammu and Kashmir, has this area 42,241 square kilometers. Out of which the Kashmir division has a lesser area, it is 15,948, but area of Jammu division is much more, it is 26,293. Ladakh, now as a separate union territory, had the largest area, was a 59,146 square kilometers. So we can go to another slide. So average population per assembly segment in Kashmir has been this 149,000. For the average population per assembly segment in Jammu has been 145,365,000. So in this, even in the previous delimitation, also the Kashmir Valley was at disadvantage. They should have more seats as per assemblies. So Muslim representation in the last assembly, I have put a chart here, was 66.66%, 58 members against 68.31%. Hindu community, which represented in the last assembly, was 31%, 27 MLAs against should have been 28.43%. So 2634. If formula of making this population as criteria for demarking electoral constituencies is in practice all over India. Nowhere actually they are practicing this formula of making geography as a part as the demarcation of the assembly constituencies. If you see the Indian states, like here I have just mentioned some, National Capital Territory of Delhi, which has 7 seats, but it has an area of just 211 square kilometers. They didn't deserve to have the 7 parliamentary seats. Or even the Madhya Pradesh, which has a largest area, it has just 29 parliamentary seats against the UP, which has 80 because of the population. So all over India, the practice is practicing this population criteria as demarking assembly constituencies, but in Kashmir, just for the sake of actually decreasing the assembly seats for the Kashmir Valley or increasing seats for the Hindu majority areas, so they are actually using this formula of geography. So we can go to slide 25. So now, despite Kashmir Valley having the more population, districts have been distributed equally between the two regions. Both these regions, like Jammu as well as the Kashmir Valley, they have 10 districts each. That's why in the recently concluded the District Development Council elections, both divisions were handed over equal number of seats. BJP claimed that they won 74 seats. Had they been distributed as per the population, the People's Alliance for Progressive Alliance, that 110 seats, we could have won more than, it could have won almost 150 seats. So we can go slide 26. Those scheme of things, what exactly is now coming up is that there, in the light of this district development council pattern, there is a likelihood of distributing 45 seats each to the Jammu as well as the Kashmir Valley division. This is how right now the delimitation commission is working, and this is actually, we're getting the sense that this will happen. And then there is a proposal to reserve 18 seats for scheduled caste Dalits, lower caste Hindus, and scheduled tribes or the tribal groups. The reserved seat, and there is also mentioned that their Kashmiri Pandit community, they may be declared also as a scheduled tribe, so they can get a reservation because there is no religion-based reservation in the as per Indian Constitution, so they may get the reservation as per the scheduled tribes. So the reserved seats are distributed between the two regions. There is a fear that this exercise will decrease the number of Muslims in the assembly, because from the reserved seats, no Muslim, particularly from Kashmir, will be able to contest. So slide 27. Slide 27, yes. This is the very time-tested formula which has been applied elsewhere in India as well, to keep this Muslim representation in the political bodies in control. An official Justice Rajendra Sachar committee had highlighted that seats where Muslims could get elected are being kept reserved for Dalits, lower caste Hindus. It had actually recommended that those seats should be reserved for Dalits where there is population is at least 30%. But let me tell you that this formula is not new and not applied by the current government, but the so-called secular governments have been applied it consistently in India to keep to lead to the political disempowerment of Muslims. You can see these seats which have been where Muslims could have been elected, they have been kept reserved for this Dalits or the scheduled castes. So no Muslim can contest these elections. So we can have the slide 20, next slide, yes. So what has happened now, or this is actually the political disempowerment which I was telling you, but just see what has happened in the bureaucracy level in Kashmir. Out of 24 secretaries, these are the government figures which are available with the Jammu and Kashmir government's General Administration Department or the DOPT, Department of Personnel Training of the Government of India. These are the figures. Out of 24 secretaries, only 5 are Muslims. Out of 58 top serving officers, just 12 are Muslims, just 17.24%. In the second tier of civilian bureaucracy, that is the Kashmir Administrative Services, Muslims are 220, just 220%, 220 makes it 42.06% out of 523. In the police services, out of 66 top police officers, just 10.6% are Muslims. In the second tier of police services, out of 248, 108, just 43.54% are Muslims. Can we get 26, 20? Yes. Now what has happened again now, because of this making it a union territory now, and the state had gone, with the second tier of the officer which was mentioned, I was mentioning you, there was 50% quota for making them promotions to the superior services. I think we call it superior services in Pakistan. Superior services in the administration, superior services in the police. It has ended. So the candidates native to Jammu and Kashmir comprise 50% of the local bureaucracy until Article 370 was revoked in the statehood into the union territory. It will no more be available. They will no more be now promoted to the superior services. So we can go section 30. So in view of the lower number of lower number of Muslims in the state bureaucracy already, now the new scheme of demarcating assembly constituencies and reserving seats will further decrease Muslims, particularly from Kashmir, in political structures. Thereby, it will complete their disempowerment. So we can go third, we can go yes. So genuine, I can say the genuine peace is possible by empowering people, not by disempowering people. Only the peace of a graveyard is possible by disempowering people. Now, the pushing peoples back to the wall is a recipe for a disaster. John Hume, architect of the Northern Ireland, was Good Friday Peace Agreement. I remember that in 2008 we had visited Northern Ireland, and the Northern Ireland peace process was actually being implemented. Once interesting, he had said that even a small where they had actually included every faction, every political party they were trying to actually they had included in the government at that time. So when I asked him a question, he had said that even a small fraction of this satisfied population, which is out of the system, can be a perpetual security threat. So therefore, for the sake of peace, it's imperative to remove dissatisfaction, evolve a people-centric approach to settle the issue of Jammu and Kashmir forever, to the lasting peace of South Asia. I think so. Just move to, can I move to, just thank you very much. If there is any questions, I'm very happy to take questions. And sorry for this, I was not able to actually handle it from here. That could have been much better.
No, sir, it's all right. And you rightly said that peace is possible only with empowering the people. And I open the floor for the question answer round. So whoever has a question, please raise their hands or they can type it in the chat box. And before that, sir, I would like to ask that what actually is the process now? Where is it leading Jammu and Kashmir? And what do you think is the outcome of the meeting that 14 political leaders of Jammu and Kashmir had with Prime Minister Modi? Do you think that they would achieve some kind of a compromise, or what kind of solution do you think is leading towards the future in Jammu and Kashmir?
On those, on that June 24 meeting, one thing was quite clear. All of these political parties had gone there not to actually press to get back the Article 370, because they had been told that since you people have gone to the court, this Article 370 is in the domain of court now. So they were demanding the return of statehood. They were demanding actually the elections to take place, because there is no government as such in Kashmir. So it was actually so somehow that okay, if maybe there's some political government may comes, there will be some kind of a relief at least on the ground, on the side. But what they were given the quite clear roadmap. Okay, the government of India is often saying to the Americans, to the political international community, yes, we are returning the statehood, but the roadmap of that statehood is much more dangerous. The roadmap of the states, what I mentioned here, I gave you that also. What the Home Minister gave a kind of a roadmap. The roadmap is now first there will be a demarcation of the new assembly segments. There will be this delimitation exercise will be completed, and as per this delimitation exercise they will conduct elections. So what will happen now, if there will be 45 seats for the Kashmir Valley, there are 45 seats for the Jammu. Out of 45 seats of the Kashmir Valley, there will be some seats which will be reserved for the scheduled tribes. Maybe if they declare Kashmiri Pandits also tribes, they will get the seats where no Muslim can contest, only though they will be able to contest. There will be seats for the lower caste Hindus, so only those they will be able to contest, no other will be contest. So what will happen now, so for the Kashmir Valley, mostly they will remain, seats may remain 39, maybe lesser even that. So Jammu will get, Jammu has this 45 seats. So actually the process is that next chief minister has to be from Jammu, next chief minister of Jammu and Kashmir has to be from a Hindu community. And since the population of Kashmir, 68, more than 68% Muslims, and they will be ruled by, it will be a kind of just like the apartheid as the South Africa had experienced. A majority was being governed by a very small minority of the small white minority. That will happen. And then it will be given a democratic facade. There is a democratic government, then assembly will come up, and that assembly will be more or less the same as the lieutenant governor's rule or the governor's rule.
So do you think that the people there in Jammu and Kashmir, they have trust in the current political leadership, which they are seeing like Mehbooba Mufti or Farooq Abdullah, the parties these belong, and what future do you see of the Hurriyat now?
See, when this on this August 5, 2019, when the Article 370 was removed, there was one thing why there was not much. The people didn't come on this. There were a lot, many other factors also, but the people here, because these Article 370, Article 35, they used to be the political agenda of these two political parties, PDP and the National Conference. So that was also one of the things that people didn't actually come on the street, didn't help them out. They had tried to create a kind of an, because of people, because there's everybody was, people say that it just whatever what has come to the Kashmir has come just because of these people. So people were quite angry with them also, with them. But if you see the overall political structure of Kashmir, the political structure, overall political structure which has actually been in Kashmir for right from 1947 till this date, there have been the two political camps. One political camp that used called itself as a maybe the anti-Delhi camp, not the anti-India camp, like what this National Conference PDP came after that. It's called itself an anti-Delhi camp, or the Kashmiri national, or the who could represent the Kashmiri nationalist views, nationalism, and could actually safeguard the Kashmiri interests in within the ambit of India, within the ambit of the Constitution of India. So then there was another political camp which was anti-India camp. So I'm just making a difference between anti-Delhi and anti-India camp. Other camp is anti-India camp. Fortunately for them, this anti-India camp had been always divided and subdivided. So its leadership, Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas, all these people, they had migrated to the Pakistani side of Kashmir. So it remained rudderless, leaderless till early 80s, till this early 90s, when the new leadership came up, in the name of Yasin Malik, Dilshad Gilani. So these people took actually the leadership of this anti-India camp. So, since this anti-India camp's problem was that they didn't, after that they were not so participating in the elections, they were not participating in the, they were not in the government structures, but anti-Delhi camp used to be in the government and in the government structures, and it was quite actually manageable for the government of India also. So they were the lesser evils for them. But right now the situation is that both are evils now for them. So they have actually all what the way they have what they have done with this anti-Delhi camp. They actually it is a lesson for almost everybody in who have been aligned to them. So these now what has this happened now is that this camp is totally in both these political. They have actually what the government of India has right now done. They have actually demolished political structures within the anti-Delhi camp as well. They are demolished completely, and within the anti-India camp also, that these political structures are completely demolished because of their all the leaders, whoever is wherever anybody from, even the smallest leaders, they have been in jails, they have been imprisoned, and the kind of cases, the kind of the things that they have been heaped on them. So the political structures are, that's why this right now, when this issue of the national, these people, they would actually think that at least for the semblance, some political structure may come up. That when June 24th meeting, these people had gone, they had this kind of a mandate that to pressure Delhi to actually restart some political structures in Kashmir, maybe the political structures. And then when the political structure comes up, so others also have some kind of an breathing space. So right now there is this, actually what exactly overall Kashmir lacks is a breathing space.
Sir, I have Mr. Imran Sardar.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to ask this question. It was really interesting and enlightening presentation that gave us some facts and figures about the delimitations. So if this commission comes up with some tangible results, which the commission says that it is expected to be raised the seats from 87 to 107, or maybe to higher to 114 seats. and that also includes the 24 seats from Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So what does it mean? It means what is the Pakistan's stance on it, or what is Pakistan's stance overall on the 2011 census? So what's your take on it? How we take it?
No, actually, the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly, much before even when the Constituent Assembly was created for Jammu and Kashmir in 1950s, it always had a 25 seats reserved for the Pakistani side of Kashmir. So always that if you could see the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly seating patterns, the 25 seats were always left vacant there. So what exactly they have now done is that they have kept 24. They have actually, I don't know why they have reduced one seat. They have now kept only 24 seats reserved for the Pakistani side of Kashmir, or the Azad Kashmir, or whatever called. So now the effective strength is only 90 seats. Other this 24 seats just an academically, just for the sake of this, just to actually for the sake of actually emphasizing that those seats, those areas also belong to us. Otherwise, academically or practically, there are just 90 seats are now. Earlier it was 87 seats, now 90 seats. New assembly has now 90 seats. So that's why they are actually distributing 45 seats to the Kashmir Valley, 45 seats to the Jammu division. So otherwise, Kashmir Valley, as per the population, as I mentioned to you, it deserves much more. It deserves much more seats. It deserves more than 50 seats, even more than that, 56 seats. So that is the for what was the other question?
Imran?
The other question was related to how Pakistan's official response to that. Means India is
Yes,
always
exactly. That is what this the actually idea of this presentation which had come. In Pakistan, actually, this issue has not been much debated. There has not been much actually the you can say knowledge about, information about this issue, that this issue has also cropped up now into the Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir has issues, and this one more issue has now cropped up in the Jammu and Kashmir. And also there is the problem other is also for I've seen the Pakistani academics and Pakistani writers also, that they also think that Jammu is a very monolithical Hindu majority area. That's why I've seen many foreign secretaries even writing in the articles where they mentioned that, where they sometimes give the solutions, okay, draw the Chenab, Chenab, make the Chenab as a boundary, and Kashmir Valley is a Muslim majority and Jammu is a Hindu majority. That is not the case even with Jammu also. Jammu has 3 divisions, 3 areas. Out of 3 areas, 2 areas are Muslim majority areas. That's how I was mentioning in this in my presentation. I think that these things should be highlighted in Pakistan. There is a dearth of kind of an information, dearth of that academic knowledge about Jammu and Kashmir in Pakistan, when our scholars, even the major top officers also have been in the positions when they write. So quite very unfortunately, there has not been much actually there has not been much actually information from Pakistan. There has not been much actually voice from Pakistan on this issue of delimitation or the redrawing of boundaries. It may not actually affect it may not be, maybe they may say that this is only the affecting to this pro-India political parties. But in the longer run, when somebody becomes a chief minister of the Jammu and Kashmir, he becomes legitimized. The international he is legitimized. He gains the legitimacy. So now the next chief, earlier there used to be the Mehbooba Mufti, there used to be the Omar Abdullah or anybody, but now after this is implemented. This is implemented. Even those pro-India who had all their life actually promoted India in Kashmir, even though they will not be able to become the chief ministers now in this next scheme of things.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Imran, you had?
Yes. I just wanted to say that I observed many a times that India, in a political design, in a legal, in a constitution, in every sphere, India keep intact the Pakistani Kashmir into its domain. So why don't we do it? I think it's a lack of knowledge, as you said. I totally agree with you. And don't you think we should do the same? For instance, incorporating in our census like we do, and other political and parliamentary resolutions. Do you think it will matter, or we should do it or not?
Much actually, the whatever I have so far I have seen and I have observed, much of the steps, much of the decisions which are taken on your side are more, mm, but unfortunately to say that they're more ad hoc decisions. They, I don't know whether they have kept the constitution of the this Azad Kashmir or the Pakistan Autonomous Kashmir is an interim constitution. It's not a fine. They are not even, there is no finality to that constitution. Even it's not so there is no finality to this that region as well. So once there is no such kind of a finality, so how should have been actually much when the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly kept those 25 seats reserved for the that part of the Kashmir. Yes, it was a they could have kept 75 seats reserved for that this part of Kashmir. So it could have been a practically, at least academically, could have been a kind of an tit for tat at that time. But I don't know why, because I can't speak on behalf of what is happening on that side, but I can speak what is happening on this side and what impact it has on us. So that's what was the maybe this and I'm quite very sometimes I get because these kind of these are all whatever I gave you, it's not something very rocket science. They're all, these all figures are in public domain, but despite these figures in the public domains, and still that there is no appreciation on the side, on that side, from even of the top officers. I told you that even the many foreign secretaries I see writing, and then they mentioned about Ladakh is a Buddhist majority, this Jammu is the Hindu majority. And I gave you in the, you got this 2011 census, Ladakh was nowhere in the Buddhist majority. Always that in terms of population, Muslims were always had an upper hand in Ladakh as well.
Thank you, sir. I have another question from Dr. Saeed Red. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I mean, it's a pleasure hearing to Iftikhar Gilani Saab, and it's really, I mean, good on your part that you have brought him, and we can get the, feedback from Kashmiris. That is really important. I have two rather, I mean, some, I would say, questions or some comments which I would like Iftikhar Saab to shed some light upon. One, I mean, rightly, as Iftikhar Saab has said, that even pro-Indian political parties now feel, like Mangal Sutra has been broken between them and Indian government. So is it not an opportunity for the Pakistani government or Pakistan in a way, or Kashmiris overall, to get united on one platform, right? Like, one and one point agenda, something like get India out of this, and then you can, bring something. So, I mean, one thing which I can see is that all the political parties within Kashmir now are convinced that India is an occupier, and India is whatever India is doing is not acceptable. So this can this bring some hope of uniting different voices in Kashmir. Secondly, I would like his opinion on Pakistani stance on third option, because that has been recently. I mean, obviously, Iftikhar Gilani Sahab knows very well that how pro-Pakistan and pro-independence groups have united on one platform recently. So, will it provide a window of opportunity? I would say, if Pakistan clearly comes on this and says that we have no objection on third option, will that help Kashmiri leadership to get united on one platform, and will it help the Kashmiri cause? Thank you.
Okay, so let me try try to give some answers. See, there's Kashmiris, they have these two identities, like all these ethnic ethnic this groups, they have these two identities. One for the Kashmiri Muslim I'm speaking about. One is the identity of being a Muslim, identity of being a Kashmiri, and then identity of being a Muslim. And for an ordinary Kashmiri, both these identities are very dear to him, and he wants to protect both these identities. He is a Muslim, he is a Kashmiri maybe for last 5,000, 6,000, thousands of years. He's a Muslim for last 800 years. So both these identities are very quite sentimental or very, Kashmiris are very protective about both these identities. When the national conference, the Sheikh Abdullah, he had been given, when he was arguing about, he supported the accession to India. So when you or one of or his this other Maulana Sayyid Masoodi, I remember in college days, we used to go visit him and quite very fiercely debate about him, why they chose India at that time. So the argument for these people was that in Pakistan, our Kashmiri identity would have been compromised, because all of Pakistan was a Muslim, and so they could, and then after that, unfortunately, Pakistan didn't, the democracy could not actually take roots in Pakistan. So our Kashmiri identity would have been compromised in Pakistan. So India gave us an assurance that it will actually protect our Kashmiri identity. It gave Article 370, it actually incorporated this Art 35A to protect the local citizenship law. So, but right now after 70 years, what we see, first, our Kashmiri identity as well as our Muslim identity, both identities are now compromised, are now under threat. So now, after, to say that at least on these issues, there is a kind of a consensus across, whether it is a pro-independent party, pro-Pakistan parties, or Kashmiri, these local, these pro-India parties. They have this current the state of environment in India is such that our both these identities are under threat, and there is a kind of a consensus, but there is maybe that it needs a kind of a leader who can actually bring all those under some platform. Right now, we don't see anybody who can do it, who will be able to do it. Now about your other question, I will give you some just to make it a kind of a some elab, because this issue comes up after in Kashmir, in Pakistan over and over, and unnecessarily this issue has seen so much bloodshed in Kashmir as well in 90s. We don't want to go back to that bloodshed and revive this debate. What exactly is the Kashmir issue? If you, it is for Indian and Pakistan academics, okay, it starts from 1947 because of the accession, because of this whatever has happened. But the issues in Kashmir, they are actually 400 years old. Maybe that I was telling you about the identity of the Kashmiri. That had actually been compromised way back in, I think, 1586, when the Mughals invaded Kashmir. And from that point of time to till, you can say that Kashmir has been always governed by the governor, through governors, right? The Mughals, whether the Afghans, whether the Sikhs, and then Dogras, it was all governed by the governors. It's not for you, the last point of your disempowerment for the Indian Muslim or the Pakistani Muslim was 1857. For Kashmir, it is way back. And back it is almost it's the 16th century. From 16th century onwards, there has been no, you can't see any Kashmiri has not been able to govern himself. Not any Kashmiri has not been even able to be, except that short period of post this 47 Sheikh Abdullah, because that he was the only kind of a leader whom actually Kashmiri identified themselves. Rest, no other leader who has governed them, whether through the democratic structures of India, took up, or they, even before that, for last 4 centuries, they have not been able to identify themselves with any ruler who has governed them. So that is the one thing. So this actually, for this, all these forces, there is this. So this is the one issue. It is a political, social, economic, psychological disempowerment of the population of Jammu and Kashmir. Number one. Number two, even if in this disempowerment, this region of Kashmir or the Kashmir Valley, I am actually, what I am actually speaking you about is about the Indian part of Kashmir where I am born, brought up, where I have seen all. So I can't speak on the other side. So in this part of the Kashmir, this was, even if after disempowerment, it was highly connected region till early 20th century. It all these caravans from Amritsar or Lahore, they used to pass through Srinagar and go to Kashgar, go to Yarkand, and even I remember in the childhood, so all these old people from Kupwara, Kupwaras, when I used to go there, that in the villages, they were actually still remembering Ali Masjid, still remembering the Kabul, still remembering Kashgar. They used to go for, they used to actually go. So what happened in the early 20th century is that because of this, and also the Islam in Kashmir, it has a Central Asian roots. The Mir Said Ali Hamadani, who brought Islam to Kashmir, his grave lies in the Klub province of Tajikistan. So they have a very affinity towards, because he is the kind of a, you can say that he like the Khaja Moinuddin Chasti is for rest of the South Asia, Mir Said Ali Hamadani is for the Kashmiris. So his grave lies in the Tajikistan that I mentioned. So in 20th century, when the Soviet Union came up, Soviet Union took up the Central Asian states. So these Central Asian became a no-go area for Kashmir. Then this Chinese, this cultural, when they took up this, when they took up Xinjiang, that this Turkey, that Kashgar, Yarkand became now the out of reach for Kashmiris. And I told you this Ladakh region, which is a very remote now area of Kashmir, till early 20th century, the Turkish was the second language there. All these Yarkandis, all these Kashgaris, when they had to go to the Hajj, they used to come via Kargil, go to Leh, and then go for the Hajj. In Ladakh, you still have the Turk communities, Argon communities living in Ladakh right now. So you can see how connected this region was. And then came the first Soviet Union, then China, and then events of 1947. It drew this line of control, made it very heavily militarized, and then it actually made it a kind of a large prison. So what exactly I told you first, now this Kashmiris, what they are suffering from the political, social, economic, and cultural and the psychological disempowerment. Now they post this 20th century events, they are suffering from the siege mentality also. It's called prison mindset. Prison mindset tell you that it is always negative. The relation between in Kashmir, an ordinary Kashmiri and his ruler is just like a relation between the jail superintendent and the prisoner. The jail superintendent also does a lot of good things for the prisoners, but this relation always remains strained. So these two issues actually, this Kashmir, and then the issue of Kashmir's Islam also, it is disconnected from its roots, disconnected from, I don't know, for last 100 years, any Kashmiri has been able to, when they celebrate Urs of Mir Said Ali Hamadani on 6th of July, in a grand fanfare in Kashmir, but none of the Kashmiri has been even able to visit the grave of Mir Said Ali Hamadani for last 100 years. So in a kind of, so this prison mindset and the disempowerment complex, if they are the two major issues in Kashmir, and they make up the issue of Kashmir as well. So now how to actually, and this is across, whether somebody is the pro-independence, somebody is the, and also for the ordinary Kashmiris, I'm again telling you that for an ordinary Kashmiri, the solution of Kashmir is not that you just pick up the border from Chakoti and then make it and drop it at Kohala. This is not in the scheme of things for an ordinary Kashmiri, that he wants another border at the Kohala. For him, that's why for him, when he looks at the western side, he looks at, because most of the roads, most of these connecting points, which I'm telling you, that they were all most of them were on the western side, were on the side where actually right now for the Pakistan exists. Even if Pakistan would not have existed there, that Kashmir, that was the only route for the Kashmir to actually observe this geoeconomics, to take advantage of geoeconomics, or to take advantage of their connectivity. So for them, they are looking at Pakistan not only on the geostrategic, because of geostrategy, but because of geoeconomics as well. So for them, this connect, having another border at the Kohala is not acceptable to any ordinary Kashmiri. I'm telling you on behalf of the Kashmir, on the Indian side of Kashmir. I'm not, but all these other voices, they are all in either Mirpur, London, or somewhere else, not in the Valley of Kashmir as such. Even those who are the Kashmiri nationalists, who those profile themselves, they are quite very clear in the Kashmir Valley what they want.
Okay, thank you, sir. There's another question from Dr. Shabana Fayaz. Ma'am, would you like to ask? Okay, let me read the question. Dr. Shabana Vyas is asking about the right to interconnectivity in the Indian Held Kashmir and what's the way forward from indigenous perspective.
That's what exactly when this one only thing which had happened for last so many years for Kashmir was that when this line of control was opened, though it was quite very, it was just a, it was not even a window, it was just a hole had been created on the line of control, and some this trade or bus had, they had started even playing, and it was so difficult to get a permit for that bus, to much more difficult than a passport, but still some semblance of that had started. Actually, this people were, it was actually seen that okay, this hole was created, maybe this hole will become window, then it will become door, or sometime then it may demolish as such as it is. But it didn't, now it didn't happen in that way. So there is this yearning of actually to, it's not only they want actually the connect, it's not only the connection between the Muzaffarabad and Srinagar, they want actually connections go beyond. Kashmir actually wants actually to reconnect itself as it was in the early 20th century. And quite a, it has, I don't know, remember back a very Indian general in Srinagar was mentioning that this Kashmir could have been a very connecting link between South Asia and Central Asia, but just because of this India-Pakistan issues, and just because of that, the events that unfolded in 47, it has become a center of dispute. It could have been a center of cooperation for everybody. And there are so many opportunities in the region if this Kashmir if Kashmir is actually made as a tool of geoeconomics. And yes, Kashmir is quite look at that. They want to revive. Just why I was mentioning about that, the dynamics of this Kashmir issue as an academic, as an on the academic terms, that this empowerment complex. If you address the disempowerment complex, you are addressing the Kashmir issue. If you are addressing this prison mindset, the siege mentality, it addresses the
Can
Kashmir
I
issue.
ask another question, please?
Hello.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Can I ask? You have rightly mentioned, Gilani Saab, the issue of connectivity within the Kashmiris all around the world and across the LOC. I'm also concerned, if you read it carefully, Humera, about the internet connectivity. That is the latest that was, imposed on the Indian held part of the Kashmiris, how they're coping with it. And are they using the other means like, proxies, and how they are communicating with other parts of the world?
Quite, I think for last 2 years, what has happened to Kashmiris, I think other day, Mr. H. Nurani has quite very well aptly mentioned in the Dawn that this what has changed in the past 2 years is the poets have given up poetry, columns by independent writers have disappeared from local newspapers, and everyone is afraid of talking. So the internet, this the internet was restored some months back, but these are with all these riders, so you can just imagine the internet has not been a, so internet was restored to some months back, but when you have all these kind of restrictions. So when the poets have given up poetry and columns by the, even if you see a Kashmiri Srinagar-based newspaper these days, most popular newspapers, on the edit pages are articles आम के फायदे. आम तो कश्मीर में पैदा भी नहीं होता है. Yeah, all these kind of columns, rather than actually riling up to doing something which what for
ये
actually
जो
media
कश्मीर
audience.
वाला और ये सारे प्रोग्राम है सोशल मीडिया पे, तो how they are managing that?
Yes, they are managing it. They are somehow managing it, but only this Kashmir Wala, he had been actually summoned so many times. And cases were filed against him. So this is the, and most of thing is that there is no actually, I don't know whether the international community doesn't have stamina or whatever they have, they have what for they are quite very concerned about the human rights, women rights, many other rights at other places, but they just look other way when it comes to this part of the unfortunate part of this world.
Thank you. I have a question from Ms. Nabila Jafar in the chat box, and she's saying that from the last part of your presentation, we get the impression that the growing deprivation of the locals from their political and governance rights will intensify the indigenous resistance. What kind of resistance do you foresee?
Actually, this disempowerment, what I have mentioned, it's not something new for the Kashmiris, but at least for some time last, somehow when some democratic structures, so-called democratic structures had come in Kashmir, under those frame, some kind of an empowerment they had gained in terms of getting into the government jobs, getting into the bureaucracy. But now actually that is also coming down now again. Kashmir has witnessed that earlier as well. In the Dogra regimes, in the Sikh regimes or other regimes, Kashmiris were always nowhere in the official machineries. They're always out. They were always subjects, and they were always outside the frame of the government. But now we again, and many of their friends, they are saying that it is not, Kashmir has now taken, it has been taken back to 1846, when the Dogras had actually ruled Kashmir, or even more than 1824 and 6 had come to Kashmir. So when they completely had disempowered the local Kashmiri population. But yes, now actually at that time, illiteracy was quite rampant. Kashmiris were not literate. Poverty was, it was a more poor area. Now actually somehow there is a, these issues these things are not now there. There will be a kind of a there will be a kind of a, you can say a reaction to this, the kind of an increasing this empowerment. This is, I'm saying you that even in the frame of even if it doesn't have any direct link with the overall the issue of Kashmir, but still what thing in as the issues of Kashmir, this matters. Yes, if tomorrow, now I gave you the figures, the kind of an representation the Kashmiri Muslims have in bureaucracy. Now increasingly now other orders coming up now, so this will decrease further. And out of 24, out of this top secretaries, none of them is a local Kashmiri Muslim now there. And it is so, even those deputy commissioners, they are now from all outside. And one of those, I just, the one of the incidents actually had happened, that in one of the deputy commissioner and one of the advisors of this government of the lieutenant governor, he's a Kashmiri, and he had actually complained against a against a district magistrate who is from the outside, and that person was put in jail. He was quite recently, this India's former this foreign minister Yashwant Sinha, when he had mentioned that one of his reports, that how that person was, he had actually complained again, is that this is a local, it's a non-Kashmiri, he's not able to explain what he wanted to say to the non-Kashmiri this district magistrate. And then when he had complained to the advisors of the governor, when he returned his home, he was, this non-Kashmiri district magistrate ordered his arrest, and he was kept in jail for so many days.
Okay, I have another question from Dr. Saidrit. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. Iftikhar Sahab, you have been talking about the history of Kashmir One question which comes to mind is, I mean, when we talk about history of Kashmir, I mean, we are saying again and again Kashmir only. I mean, I remember in one of the seminar recently, one guy from Kotli said, why are you saying just Kashmir? Why not Jammu and Kashmir? Because he felt like Jammu is missing when you are saying Kashmir. So, I mean, when we talk about Kashmir, obviously it's 4 or 5 regions, not just valley. What is your opinion, especially with regard to Gilgit-Baltistan? I mean, Gilgit-Baltistan became part of Kashmir somehow, but what, do you really think, I mean, they are part of Kashmir? And because they themselves say very clearly now that they don't want to, they don't feel like they are part of Kashmir. So what is your take on this? Thank you.
That is why when I started it, I showed you the map of Jammu and Kashmir, what has happened to the map of Jammu and Kashmir over the years. So, but academically, if somehow tomorrow, as per the even the constitution of Jammu and Kashmir, in the Hurriyat conference itself, for their constitution also, they mentioned Jammu and Kashmir as the Kashmir that existed on August 1947. So that is the Jammu and Kashmir. That is what exactly for which Jammu and Kashmir they are actually struggling. They are fighting. So for us also for us the Jammu and Kashmir is that which existed at on August 1947. But why I am talking about not of, I have no idea about those areas. I could get the figures of this area, what is happening in this area. I can't. I can. I have been living. So I can speak about this area, and also that this why only Kashmir, because for last this 400 years, most of it is the Kashmir Valley which has suffered much more than any other areas. Other areas were able to compromise somehow. Punch, these areas they because they had an quite a compatibility with the nearby Punjab. They had relations there. They had a lot of I think they were the people were that they had a fallback. The people were there for them to take care of them, at least to raise their voices. Many of the people there they were in the government jobs. They were in in the British army. They were in the Dogra army also. So the kind of an disempowerment, the kind of kind of this the history which has been seen, it was the Kashmir Valley. And in 1824, when the ban on beef was imposed by the Diwan Kriparam by the through the Sikhs under the Maharaja Ranjit Singh. You remember, this is the only area maybe all over the world where 19 people have been hanged to death just because of possession of the beef. So and this area has, and this in 1860, much before this Haymarket incident, which is we remember as a May Day, much before that, on 29th April, before I think 25 years before that, the first trade union movement had actually taken place in the Srinagar. And on that day also, the 28 some 30 people were killed and drowned in the river Jhelum because of the shawl weavers. They were demanding that exemption from taxes. So for us, Jammu and Kashmir, yes, Jammu and Kashmir is what exactly was that in August 1947. But for us, Jammu and Kashmir is what was it before August 5, 2019. But now it has been divided, subdivided, and it has now, I don't know whether how long this Jammu, maybe they may, or the original scheme of things before August 5, 2019 was to make 3 union territories: Jammu separate, Kashmir separate, and the Ladakh separate. But then I think that some sense, I don't know whether some sense or nonsense came to them, that they start only to get the Ladakh out of the Jammu and Kashmir. Right now, actually, nothing is in our hands.
Okay, thank you, sir. We have 2 questions from Ms. Mariam Mastoor. She's saying, if Kashmiris are ever given a chance to decide for themselves, what decision would that be? And secondly, we hear a lot about enforced disappearances in Jammu and Kashmir, how the Kashmiris are dealing with them. Thank you.
first question, I gave a quite a very elaborate answer. What exactly, when I was mentioning about the siege mentality, I was mentioning about the disempowerment complex. Kashmir does not want to live in an area where it is again being, where it is again actually becomes a kind of an isolated, isolated area or isolated place. For a Kashmiri, for him, the independence is the connectivity. For him, the independence, for him, the freedom is to actually give him an freedom is to that the world opens for him, not that we can pick up that border from Chakoti and then put that at Kohala. That is not the scheme of things, at least for those people who live in the Kashmir Valley. So they want to get out of that large prison. For that, I think that should actually answer your question. This debate was actually induced in Kashmir. There was no such debate in Kashmir ever. It was induced from somewhere, and then lot of it. We have seen a lot of bloodshed. A lot of people actually were killed just because of this debate, and we don't want that revive that debate again in the Kashmir, at least at this time. So this is we are first. We have there has to be some priorities first, and when those things actually are actually those priorities get fulfilled, then there is this this next. But this that's why exactly when a lot of people actually a lot of interactors and a lot of people when they study these things, when you in these parameters, many people actually think that there is a possibility the Kashmir issue can be settled through geoeconomics, if not through geostrategy. There is a possibility, but I leave it to that. I leave it to that. I don't think there is, because these things, there's not time to elaborate these things. But there is a possibility that because of this, if you just address these issues, maybe maybe even if it may not settle the issue of Kashmir, maybe at least it can blunt those rough edges from this issue of Kashmir. And what was the other question? Was that
The second question was that we hear a lot about enforced disappearances
yes,
in
yes, yes,
Jammu and
exactly,
Kashmir.
exactly. This
So how
that
the
is
Kashmiris are dealing with them?
that is a quite a document. That's a quite a document. I think the association of this could be the only place in the world where there is an association of parents of disappeared persons. It's a quite a very documented. They have all those document for them. They, I think the figure is some 10,000, but government says there are not more than 2,000 or 3,000. But there have been disappearances of, and for so many times. And the issue is those people actually were involved in the disappearances. What we have done actually, there was a famous case of that famous that lawyer, the Jalil Andrabi, who was killed in early 90s, disappeared, and then and the person who was involved in that was that Major Avatar Singh. And that person, when they, because it was a case of a very leading lawyer, so the High Court took a very serious note of that, issued summons to the Jammu and Kashmir police, and then this man was transferred by the army, and then he was taken. Then the Jammu and Kashmir police traced him somewhere, and they went to get him arrested, and they were beaten by the army. And they came back and complained to the Jammu and Kashmir High Court. Then there was like a notice to the army that the army said that this person has disappeared. We don't know where he is. Then somehow came to know that this person had been given passport and has left, is in Canada. Then this from Canada, then all this time, for some more than a decade, this case was going on, and they were always telling the court that he's untraceable. Then one fine day, this person was actually had beaten his wife, and his wife he was in America. Wife had complained to the police, and when he was taken to the police, his finger marks were taken, and it came to know that this person is the Major Avatar Singh, whom the Indian government had a issue in the Jammu and Kashmir High Court had asked the CBI to issue his warrant, but nothing happened. He was not brought back, but after 1 year, because of that, he had gone psychic, and he killed himself, and he killed he killed his family as well in Texas, I think, in America. we could have worked quite very hard with the Americans, with the Canadians to bring him to the justice, but we couldn't do that. There are so many other cases. I just mentioned one because this was a quite very highly the reported case and where they actually courts took cognizance in India. Otherwise, there are so many other cases.
Sorry, I have one more question. Actually, I have asked many questions, but it's very interesting discussion. You have mentioned that basically freedom for Kashmir would mean freedom to the access to the world, connectivity, and that. So I have a question. I mean, what is your take on Musharraf's 4-point resolution, which actually talked about similar things like open borders and demilitarization and joint control, things like that. So do you think that would have somehow the thing you as you mentioned, made some fences, something that kind of thing could have done?
They were actually 9-point formula, not the 4-point formula. If you see the Kasuri's book, you can get in detail the 9-point formula. That 9-point formula, maybe if not the issue, it would not have solved the issue of Kashmir, but it was a good confidence building measures. As a confidence building measures, I think they were the good steps. And because of those confidence measures, the line of control, I told you that a hole in the line of control had opened up. So we were expecting that, okay, this hole has opened up, this hole may become tomorrow a window, then it may become a door, then maybe that after the door it may become a gate, but it didn't work like that. So unless these confidence building measures can sustain when they are actually being backed up with you can say the needs actually the political will as well. Needs actually they need because they can be sustained. They were not able, they could not sustain if this one point only out of this all these we mentioned about the Musharraf's this 9-point formula, only one thing had been implemented, that was only this line of control. That we could not sustain even that as well. How, I don't know whether we have been able to sustain all those 9 points which I mentioned in that formula. But as a confidence building measures, yes, I think they were they had given a kind of a relief or a kind of a message in Kashmir, because the Kashmir Valley has this issue as well. It may not be an issue. You can't actually imagine that kind of an issue in your part in the part of Kashmir which is in Pakistan, or even the part, because I remember in 2015 when with the late Shujat Bukhari, that a delegation of the Kashmiri journalists had first time actually gone to the Muzaffarabad, and in Muzaffarabad, what exactly enticed them, what exactly felt for them was that in that some Muzaffarabad with that choke, there are those arrows, Tashkent, Samarkand, Kashgar, or Yarkut, some arrows in that Muzaffarabad, and it became for them it became a kind of very emotional. They became quite very emotional. That in Muzaffarabad, you can this signboards. It shows an arrow towards Tashkent. It shows arrow towards all these different capitals of the world. In Kashmir, Kashmir, they see themselves in a very large prison. So that is for this Musharraf, yes, as a CBMs, as a confidence building measures, but they were not implemented. What else you can do? And they didn't sustain.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was all. And Gilani Saab, it was a pleasure listening and learning from you. Thank you so much once again for giving an insight into the important subject of situation in Kashmir. And I thank everyone for joining in and participating in the discussion. Thank you so much once again. Have a nice day.
Okay, thank you very much. बहुत बहुत
Thank you,
शुक्रिया
sir.
आपका
Thank you.
मेरा